our September the 8th, 2020 council work session. And I'd like to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mr. Reynolds?
Here.
Ms. Shinholster?
Here.
Mr. Mullins?
Here.
Mrs. Walden?
Here.
Mr. Chambers?
Here.
Dr. Lee?
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum present. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got a plethora of things to talk about here tonight, and but I think we can get them all done and still have a few minutes, excuse me, to go into a closed session to talk about one other issue. I want to start out by discussing where we are in terms of the updates and changes that we made in order to try to educate and enforce our restaurants around town based on what we talked about at the August 17th, I believe it was, call work session. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here with you and just run through a couple of things, and then obviously I'll take questions from y'all when you all have them. You should see up on your screen now what I shared with you all via email yesterday afternoon. I'm going to run through parts that were part of the original plan that we put together and just kind of highlight those, and then talk more in depth about the parts that were new. The general information is pretty much the same, except for the fact that it's based on the most recent governor's executive order, which was 08/31/2002. That was the one that he put into effect on August 31st, just prior to the one that he had in effect at that point in time expiring. Definition for social distancing and retaining from gathering is the same as it was before. I go into a little bit of information about what the executive order states in terms of wanting residents and visitors of the state to refrain from gathering, and also to practice social distancing. And then I added that based on our August 17th called work session, that I think we were in agreement that our areas of concern that relate to social distancing and gathering included restaurants and dining rooms, bars, not necessarily as they're defined by the governor's executive order, but as they were defined by the way we talked about them on August 17th, and then parties. I had originally said house parties, but then I thought, the parties may be somewhere other than houses. So we'll just simply talk about parties in general in terms of them being gathering locations. Nothing new in the restaurants and dining room information over what was there before. Pretty straightforward that the two things that enforcement would be looking at would be trying to make sure that there were 6 feet of separation between patrons, and not allowing patrons to congregate on the restaurant premises, and trying to make sure that people just simply had the opportunity to social distance in the restaurant. So no changes there. Then the new part, one of 2 new parts in this information is the bars, based on how we defined them on August 17th, and based on what you all shared, there is a notation here about if a restaurant chooses to close their kitchen or food preparation area at some point in time during their daily operation, if they choose to check IDs prior to somebody coming into the establishment, or if they choose to charge a cover charge prior to a patron coming into the establishment. Any of those three things triggers them having to follow the bar requirements of the governor's executive order rather than the restaurants and dining services, which there are 39 of. There were 35 for restaurants, 39 for bars, and I have listed 6 of them here that would be the parts for enforcement if you all choose to go forward with this the way it's spelled out here. Obviously, enforcing social distancing. One of the things that's different once we start looking at an establishment as a bar from the governor's executive order standpoint is they can only have 50 people or 35% of their total listed fire capacity occupancy, whichever one of those is greater. Limiting party size at tables to no more than 6, preventing patrons from congregating on the bar premises, and preventing activities that enable close human contact. I put number 6 in there. It's part of the governor's executive order. I put it in there in case some of these places started having bands again and they had dancing. Obviously, we would need to stop that because that enables close human contact. And then parties is the second new part of this plan. Went into a little bit of general information about parties, and but basically said that from the standpoint of enforcement for parties, it shall mean when more than 50 people are physically present at a single location and they cannot stand or be seated 6 feet apart from any other person. Implementation and enforcement is pretty much the same as it was in the previous information that we put together. There will be, from the standpoint of the restaurants and dining rooms and the bar piece in this new information, there'll be 2 warnings, 2 citations, and then upon the second citation, as the governor's executive order says, the potential to close that particular business down through the duration of that current executive order exists, or the possibility of that exists. Bars, the same thing. What's different, or not different, but what triggers the bar piece is one of those 3 things that I mentioned in terms of them closing their kitchen or food service, food preparation area, beginning to check IDs at the door, or beginning to charge a cover charge. Any of those, one of any of those, and obviously the combination of all of them would start them having to be implemented, the requirements implemented as the bar piece. I did make notation in here that if that occurred, any of those 3 items occurred and they went into being enforced from the standpoint of bars, they would need to empty their establishment just prior to doing that, because then obviously we need to start looking at the number of people that they have in their business based on the fact that they can only have 50 or 35% of their total listed fire capacity occupancy. And then from a standpoint of enforcement for parties, pretty straightforward. If it's determined that a party is violating the requirement of the governor's executive order, there'll be a verbal warning. There will be 2 written warnings, and then the legal residents of that building and possibly those attending the party have the potential to be cited at the discretion of the police officer, obviously. And based on conversation with Dr. Dorman, anyone who is cited that is determined to be a student at Georgia College, he has asked that their information be shared with the Georgia College and State University Police, so that they have the potential to come before an honor code violation at the college. and just simply made a general statement that none of this has any effect on our mask ordinance. The mask ordinance is the area that we're having trouble with out on the sidewalk, but the police officers are doing a really good job with that. I was downtown Thursday night, was a week ago, and I think they actually cited, there were 2 citations written for the mask ordinance on Thursday night of last week. What we're finding, or what they're finding and sharing with us, and what I saw on that Thursday night, was they have to be reminded. They typically have one in their pocket. They'll pull it out and put it on, or they'll leave and go get one, or they'll leave and not come back. So there may be times when you might see photographs of people standing in a line on the sidewalk not wearing masks, but that's just simply because the police officers haven't made it back around to where they were before. One of the things that has not been occurring up until now is we have not had any additional officers working overtime on this assignment, but if you all approve what I'm sharing with you tonight, then we will start back doing that and compensating those officers with money from the CARES Act that we are receiving. So with that, I'll answer any questions about that piece. If any of you has any, let me know if I missed anything that we discussed on August 17th, if I misinterpreted anything, and we can make those changes.
If a business wishes to remain a restaurant and they keep their kitchen open, they are not to, number one, empty the premises, and number two, start charging at some given point in time a cover charge. Does that keep them still in a position of being a restaurant?
Yes. That is the way I would interpret it, and the way the police officers would interpret it.
Okay.
If they keep their kitchen open, if they are not checking IDs at the door, if they are not charging a cover charge, then they remain under the purview of the restaurant guidelines for the governor's executive order. But if they do any of those 3 things, then at that point in time, they become a bar from the standpoint of interpretation of the governor's executive order.
Okay. The only other thing about exiting the whole building, that concerns me a little bit, of congregation. Getting everybody out and not, for the lack of a better word, herding everybody out and, in one big group onto the sidewalks, and they all stand there remaining, trying to get back in, turning around and paying a fee, a cover charge. I just, that's one thing that I thought about when you're emptying.
One of the things that we've found, Mr. Chambers, is that the businesses are doing that anyway.
Okay.
When they get ready to make that transition around 10:30, somewhere along in there, they are doing that anyway, because they are counting the number of people that they let in, and obviously they want to have the opportunity to charge those people the cover charge.
Right, I understand that. I guess a really long time ago, I was working in the bars, and we had a certain time, and way back then, before all this took place of restaurants and so on and so forth, that we would start charging a cover charge. And at that point in time, someone would go around to everybody that was already in there and would collect a cover charge if they were going to stay. If they were not going to stay, then they would walk out, go ahead and leave out the door. I guess my point is that I'm just concerned, if you've got 30 or 40 people in there that you turn them out all at one time, they all of a sudden become condensed. And if they don't have masks on, which I guess they should, but if they don't, then that has the potential of a lot of people, coming in contact with each other.
And to build on Steve's points there, you have a lot of people that are going to be sitting in the restaurant up to the point that the restaurant may begin charging a cover charge, checking IDs, etc. It's not uncommon for individuals to come in at 10 till close of the kitchen, order a full meal, and be eating well past the time that the kitchen actually closes. What leeway do we have for restaurants that have guests that are still eating? I mean, if I'm in the middle of my meal and the business is ready to transition over, is there an hour or a 30-minute window in that period? How does a business accommodate for something like that? They don't want to miss out on being able to let patrons in to be able to begin enjoying their after dinner service options, but they also don't want to herd people that are in the middle of their dinner service out the door.
One thing, Walter, that one thing I'll mention is that was done was hours of, or a warning, I guess, similar to a last call with an alcohol drink, but, letting everybody know that, and especially those coming in, that they've got a certain amount of time that they need to go ahead and order, and that's done at least 30, 45 minutes before the kitchen's going to be closing, so that not only can the order come out, but you also have time to be able to enjoy it. But that's just one suggestion.
Well, I think at least with what I saw, the one night I was downtown and shared the information with y'all. Yeah, I did not see anywhere that night that when they started making the transition, there weren't few enough people in those businesses that they couldn't count and say, all right, we've already got 30 in here, or we've already got 40 in here, or whatever, and do it that way. So, we can change the wording on that to say that upon one of those three things happening, then the restaurant needs to make sure that they have a total number of people that are already in their establishment in order to put that number towards their capacity that they're allowed to have.
I think that's a better option for us there. I mean, it just seems kind of cumbersome to have everyone clear out of the restaurant and file back in, when surely whoever is managing the door for that restaurant can do a quick hit count before they let anyone in. And that eliminates the issue of an overlap in times between people enjoying their meal and people getting ready to come in for after dinner services. I think that would be preferable and far more palatable to the restaurateurs.
Mr. I have a question that you shared with me about the Velvet Elvis and having a back porch type thing where they can go outside and sit in the back. So if that's sitting in the back, are they allowed to exit from that back without having to come back in? Or do they have to come back through the restaurant as a number count to go back out that door?
What that particular restaurant did the night that I was downtown is they were only allowing people in the front door, and people were exiting out the back door. And one of the requirements of the governor's executive order is that there be a separate means of ingress and egress, that they have to meet that requirement. And it appeared to me, as I watched the process, that the reason folks were lined up on the sidewalk was because no one was let in the front door until communication was made with the person at the front door that a person had left from the back door, in order to make sure that they were they at least appeared that they were attempting to control the number of people that were coming in.
Okay.
But for the purposes of figuring the 35% capacity, if that particular business made the transition over to the bar requirement in this plan, that outdoor area would be considered part of their property that the 35% is determined on.
Is that the only facility that has a back out? I mean, a way to go out the back. I'm sorry.
No, there are others downtown that do. I know Metropolis does, although they typically stay within the restaurant guidelines.
Buffington.
I think Buffington's does, and but I don't believe Ned Kelly's does.
Capital City has a back door.
Say again, Mr. Shinoff.
Capital City,
Ned Kelly's does have.
they have a back door.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
I don't frequent those places, so I can't tell you for sure. So.
I do.
I had to sneak out of the house that Thursday night, so my wife didn't know I was gone.
I was going to ask you how long did it take you to get over that.
Okay.
And obviously, the 35% piece, that's one of those things that's certainly up to law enforcement discretion. They obviously are not going to be able to do quick calculations to make that determination, but to me, it really boils down to the only business that I went in that Thursday night when I was downtown was Buffington's, and it was just a situation with them that you needed to stop people from crowding around the bar and actually have them go sit down at tables. And if you did that in that particular business, that seemed to be working for them. So, that's the kind of thing that the officers are going to be looking at, that folks aren't crowding around the bar. They don't have more than 6 people at a table. They're trying to just keep people social distanced as much as possible, because you don't have to read too much to know that the college towns, all college towns, are getting a bad rap right now in terms of the spread of COVID. I think it's a factual rap, even if it's a bad rap, and quite frankly, I think it's boiling down to wherever those parties are taking place, whether it's in a bar or at a house or wherever. So we will make that change, that just, asking the owners or the managers to do a general head count prior to making that change over. And that obviously would only be for the ones who have done one of the 3 things that pushes them into the bar requirements. Counselor, do you see any concerns with this from a legal standpoint?
No, I think it is, y'all have done a really good job on it, Hank. I think it is keeping in mind that it is actually simply enforcing the governor's emergency order in the areas that he has given local governments the authority to enforce. And the way that y'all set it up is probably a little bit more lenient than what you could do relative to the warning and citations. But I think that's the educational piece of what y'all have put together. And you know, we have a little bit different situation in Milledgeville, as we discussed the last time, relative to when our restaurants become bars. And I think you are clearly meeting the intent of this and the spirit of what the executive order allows you to do. And so, no, I can commend everybody that has worked on it. It's a good plan.
Anything else from anybody? Well, if not, we will start this program up again this Thursday night, and obviously keep you all informed as to how things are going. I will say to you all on this public meeting what I said to Chief Swikert the Friday morning after I was downtown. The police officers did a wonderful job that night. They were professional. They were much more patient than I would have been. And I think we've got the right people down there carrying us through this process. And I feel confident that they will take these guidelines and do a good job with them. All right, the next thing I want to share with you.
Can I mention something right quick?
Yes, sir.
Number one, I've gotten a couple of calls that said wanted council to keep you from coming downtown. So I just wanted to mention that to you. You know, the word's out.
Okay.
But I do want to mention an article that I read that had across the country 30 universities, colleges, and university towns that would possibly be most affected by the COVID-19 should the kids all be sent home. You know, what would happen to the community. And I thought it was very interesting that number 6 was Georgia Southern, and that the 25,000 plus students at Georgia Southern make up 66 +% of the city's population.
Wow.
And the number 2 university in the nation, or college town in the nation, was Kennesaw State University. And the 25,000 students there make up 85% of the city's population. So when we think about Georgia College being sent home, and what impact it has upon our community, can you imagine what Kennesaw must be thinking if they were to have to go through that situation? That certainly would be devastating.
Well,
that's
it
the
obviously
importance
would be
that I think a lot of these businesses, especially in the downtown area, need to understand. What they're trying to help us create as a safe environment so that everybody can remain and we can continue business, even though it's not as usual, but at least continue business. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, I've shared with you all that I would bring some analysis data to you on the request that we had gotten to rename McIntosh Street. I have not sent you all this by email yet, but I will as soon as this meeting is over with, but I do have it on the screen. I want to share this with you so you can see the angle that I'm coming at it from. And see if there's any other information that you all would like to have. I've given you bits and pieces of this information over the last month as we've had meetings, but this will kind of wrap it all up. If you look at McIntosh Street beginning on the east end at Lincoln Street in the Riverbend Apartments and go all the way to the west to Richmond Street, right there at the gates of Westview Cemetery. There are 59 individual parcels in that stretch, and you see that I've got got them broken down by blocks, and then I looked at the individual addresses within each of those blocks, and the ones that I have approximately on those, the approximately word is based on the fact that that particular block has some form of multifamily housing. Some of those I was able to go find out specifically the number of addresses. For example, the station at McIntosh, Pecan Hills, I could look on those sites on the internet and see how many units they had. Others, it was determined by actually going and looking at the properties, and then from there making some educated guesses. But based on individual addresses, you can see that there's approximately 229 individual addresses in those 59 parcels that make up those blocks from Lincoln Street to Richmond Street on East and West McIntosh. There are 17 total cross streets or intersections. Obviously, that's important from the standpoint of signage, and you'll see how that plays into things when we get down to the cost analysis. I wanted to look at the processes and procedures that the city would have to do, and businesses and our residents in this stretch would have to do, and try to get approximate costs on those. Obviously, we as the city would need to contact each individual property owner and resident or business in those parcels using the approximately 229 number that I calculated. A first-class letter to those folks would be the $125.95 that you see there. We would have to edit all of the necessary maps and databases that go to Tax Assessor, Secretary of State, Justice Department, Q Public, voting maps, any map that the Regional Commission maintains for us. We would do the initial edits on those. Our in-house GIS coordinator would do that. And that's an estimate of about 160 hours to do that at his hourly rate. And then provide that new information to the necessary entities that I just mentioned. That most likely would be about half of the amount of time that it would take to do all the edits on the maps and the databases. So that is his hourly rate for those 80 hours to come up with the two figures that you see there. And then some contacts would have to be made, obviously, with the post office. The initial contact to the post office in terms of cost to the city would be minimal. Probably most likely nothing to the residents, just in terms of them making a general contact with them, although it would take some time and effort for them to do that. Entities with which businesses and residents do business, there is an estimate on that for the city, which would be for the police department, because that's the only city address that is impacted by this change if it were to take place. And that's a variable cost for the addressee, depending on the time and effort that it took for them. You know, some people may have, or some businesses may have only one or two folks that they would have to, or companies that they would have to contact, and some may have, you know, a large number of them. And then update contact information for the affected city office. That would be the police department. So you can see the estimate there for letterhead and business card reprint. We need to have the sign out front relettered, website updates everywhere that the address is listed on the website. And so that is purely an estimate right there of $2,000 that I created that estimate. To the replacing of the street signs, I mentioned that there are 17 cross streets or intersections. You would need to put street signs on diagonally opposite corners, 2 diagonally opposite corners at each one of those intersections. So that means 4 signs at each intersection, 17 intersections. Those signs, believe it or not, are $58.10 a piece. The signs themselves would be the $3,950.80 that you see there. You have to have brackets to put those two signs together on the cross streets. You see the price of those. Most likely would need to replace the posts that are there. If not replace all of them, probably replace about 50% of them, because when I rode down through there, some of those posts need replacing anyway. And then the installation at 1131, which is the average street maintenance worker in the Public Works Department there for, you can see the subtotal of a little over $15,000. I put a 10% contingency in there just in case my estimates were off or for items that I missed, and didn't add that up right. So that ends up being $16,786.15. So, so we're looking cost-wise somewhere between $16,000 and $18,000 if this was to happen. There are a couple of notes that I have here. Number one of the things we found out as we were talking with the courthouse when Mervyn was getting this information together for me with them, the earliest renaming could take place would be in January due to 2020 being an election year and ballots being mailed out and those kinds of things. And then I did not include any cost in here associated with the renaming of Black Heritage Plaza, which was also part of this request. So I'm not looking for any action tonight. I just wanted to share this information with you because I told you that I would. I will forward it to you via email, and if you all have any questions I can answer now, I'll be happy to, or when you've had the chance to look at the information and digest it a little bit, I'll be happy to take questions from you from that. So,
just a quick side note there, Hank. There is one other publicly funded entity that costs for renaming, letterhead, business cards, et cetera, should probably be included in these calculations, or at least considered, and that would be Allied Arts. Their offices there are along McIntosh. They have addresses which I believe are on McIntosh, and that may need to be figured into this as well.
That is correct. I did not consider them a city agency from the standpoint of this information. I just considered them one of the residents or businesses that would be affected.
But their main address is on Wayne Street.
Is it on Wayne?
It's Wayne Street.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Thank you,
think they
Michelle.
have. I think they share the Allen's Market address when there's an event there. Isn't that right, Ms. Shinozer?
Right.
So I will forward this information to you so that you have it. You can digest it once you do that. Like I said, if there are any questions you have from there, then I'll be more than happy to entertain those questions or answer them for you. The third thing I'd like to talk to you about is back in July, you all approved an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Oconee River Greenway Authority for the maintenance and management of the Greenway. And there was a secondary piece to that in the verbal conversations that Mr. Marion Nelson and Mr. Jarrett had prior to Mr. Jarrett retiring, that dealt with the administration of the TE grant that the Greenway had applied for and felt like they would get for the extension of the Fishing Creek Trail, taking it from Wilkinson Street to what was originally just across the street from Central City Park, but the railroad got kind of involved and slowed things down, and Mr. Jarrett, prior to his retirement, gave the Greenway Authority verbal approval to take that trail up a new sidewalk by Flag Chapel Lane to come up from the trail area there. The Greenway Authority found out just this past week that they have received that $1 million TE grant. They will be matching that with another $250,000 that has been assured to them will come from the county's SPLOST funds, not from the current SPLOST, but from the previous SPLOST. And they have now approached us about making good on the agreement, verbal agreement to actually administer that. The only way I see that we can do that is if we contract that out, but those contracted costs could be expended toward the match for the grant. I have gotten information from two different entities that have interest in doing that. One is the company that actually designed the system, so they know it well and can do it relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things, or relatively inexpensive. And then one other that has a cost of about double that. But what I would like to be able to do is at our September 22nd, no, is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
September 22nd meeting, bring before you a resolution to, in fact, administer that TE grant for the Greenway Authority, and also a contract with, right now, an unnamed company in order to do the construction management of that contract. So I will obviously send you all of that. If you all say tonight that's something that you're interested in, I'll get started immediately tomorrow on that resolution and the management contracts, and get that to you so that we can have the opportunity to talk about them in detail before we meet on the 22nd. Obviously, I would not give it to you that night. You would have it well in advance so you could study it and determine if there were anything in there that needed to change. But I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on putting those two things together if there was not an appetite from you tonight in order to be willing to look at the possibility of doing that. And the room was silent.
Hearing no objection, I would say proceed, sir.
Okay. All right.
Is that everybody saying proceed?
I'm good.
I'll look at it.
Dr. Mitchell, go ahead.
I mean, I want to read the contract or whatever.
Right.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, and and like I said, I would have that information to y'all by the end of this week, so you would have a good long while to read through it, digest it, and ask any questions that you have. So, okay, just a couple of other quick information items before we go into closed session to discuss one item. I do want to let you know that all of our CARES Act funding requests for round one got in on time, and even before September 1st, we found out that that money was coming to us. Since this was a reimbursement piece in round one, we're going to have some pretty wide leeway in order to use those funds, and I will be sharing that with my ideas on that with you very soon. I want to thank you all and the mayor for passing a resolution very quickly that we brought before you one night without a whole lot of information, but between that and the work of Miss Danzy and me asking her every day, where were we? That information got in by September 1, and that all happened. We were initially notified July 28th that this money would be available. So in a month's time, that all occurred. And so we anticipate rounds 2 and 3 should be coming soon. That money will be much more restrictive. We basically will have to have approval before we make those purchases. But That was a good team effort across the board to get that done. I want to thank not only our local folks, but GMA for working so hard for cities to be able to get that money. But the reason I want to thank our local folks so much is because I can tell you from sitting in on webinars of it and watching the listserv for city managers, we were a very progressive city in getting that done, and others were not. So I'm excited about the fact that we got that done, and appreciate y'all's help in doing that. One of the things we had talked about when we were in Athens in January, which seems like 10 years ago, but one of the things we talked about during that planning meeting was looking at the possibility of kind of making it standard plans that we have a work session prior to each meeting. So we would have 2 work sessions during the month instead of 1. I think as we deal with more and more things that need to have some expanded discussion, that might be good for us to revisit. So I wanted to ask, is there anybody who has any problem with us just making it standard operating procedure that beginning in October we would have a work session prior to each meeting of the month? And if we don't have anything to discuss, we won't have it the second.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not going to sit up here and look at each other for an hour if there's not anything to talk about. But I'd just like to have that ability, without it being a call meeting, if we could.
I didn't hear anything about a raise.
We can talk about that in January. We'll talk about it.
That would be an extra hour.
Now, one of the things that really occurred to me was how important it is for us to get together and bat things around like we did with the rehash of this education and enforcement plan. And I think we could just have the opportunity to do that much better if we had that standing work session and everybody was anticipating it, and then it would be a gift when we didn't have to have it on that second meeting.
Well, honestly, after coming off of service delivery, I thought that was the norm.
I did too. Service delivery and then budget. Those things went bam, bam, right behind each other.
I thought that was the norm. So when we didn't have one, it felt funny. So it's just been part of a standard. We met for 3 years straight. Every meeting almost before council. So it's not unusual.
It's about 6:18, Mr. Griffith.
Yes, ma'am. I've only got one more thing I want to mention before we go in closed session. I don't think closed session will take long. Anyone have any questions about the budget amendment that is on the agenda for tonight? Obviously, that's a first read, so you will not be voting on that until the next meeting unless you decide you want to vote on it tonight. But I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions about that. And if not, I'm ready to go into closed session, Mayor.
Don't we have a tree surgeon? It said to add 1 tree surgeon position. I thought we had one.
No, ma'am, we do not have a tree surgeon with that title. We have someone who is doing some tree trimming for us, but they are not in that particular titled position. Mr. Thomas came to me and asked if that was a possibility to have that, and I told him that at this point in time, the only way we could add new positions would be to take away a position, and so that's when
What's he going to do with the positions that he's taken away?
that is currently an open position.
Both of them are open?
No, ma'am, just the one that we are eliminating is open. The tree surgeon position is not filled at this point in time because it's not in the budget.
Okay, well, in here it says eliminate 1 yard trimming collection and equipment operator.
Yeah, it does. That was my next question, Ms. Walden.
The equipment operator is the actual generic title for that position. That is, if you look in your budget, under solid waste, there is an equipment operator in there. Mr. Thomas actually calls them yard trimmings collections, but in terms of the generic title that we use in our budget preparation, it is an equipment operator.
So that's one in the same position. So shouldn't it be worded different? Because I'm like Jeanette, it gives the appearance that there's two positions.
That there's two of them.
That we're eliminating. So it seems like it would be something in parentheses showing that, if that's the generic name, then in parentheses, the official name, and then it doesn't have the appearance of two positions.
Well, I mean, we could easily just pull the yard trimmings collection and management piece off and just say equipment operator, because that's the position that we would be eliminating.
Okay, well, I'm like Jeanette, it just, I was thinking that we were eliminating two positions.
Only one position being eliminated.
It is too.
So
I just.
we will amend the ordinance to just simply say eliminate an equipment operator position and add, eliminate one equipment operator position and add one tree surgeon position.
And that equipment operator position was at a 10, and it paid $24,726, and the tree surgeon position is going to be a 14 at $30,000.
That's correct. The average equipment operator is a little bit higher than that pay grade 10. That pay grade 10 that's listed there is the number one. The A level of pay grade 10, and we are on average about level C for pay grades, but the pay grade position for the tree surgeon would start at level A.
My question was one of the things about the duties, so they're going to be cutting branches from around power lines and not Georgia Power?
They will be cutting limbs from anywhere on the right-of-way that they need to, that Georgia Power may not be getting to.
Oh, because I know the first sentence said around power lines, and I thought, oh, wow, that's saying a lot. The first sentence in the job duties.
Well, that's where limbs on the right-of-way are, is around power lines, so that would be happening.
It's kind of dangerous.
Have they not been doing that in the past already, or is that a new duty?
That is occurring when right-of-ways are trimmed, yes, ma'am. You all read through the ordinance and let me know if you want to change that job description in any way before you vote on it, and we can certainly look at doing that. But we will amend the ordinance to state it correctly the way you all have recommended.
Hank, just one quick question, if I could. I had a question come in from a restaurateur downtown about the sidewalk dining permits. Are those going to continue to roll over month to month at this point, or have those been extended?
They have not been extended. They're in effect through the end of September.
Okay, through the end of September. At that point, we'll need to vote to amend those, or is that an administrative task?
They will have to be voted. The resolution will have to be voted on to have them extended.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mayor, I'm ready to go into closed session real quickly if we can.
Y'all have enough time in 5 minutes? It's 25 after.
I think so.
All right. Need a motion to come out of regular session and go into, to go into closed session pending personnel matter.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All right, this particular clerk call the roll.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Shinholster,
Aye.
Mr. Mullins,
Aye.
Ms. Walden,
Ms. Walden?
Aye.
Mr. Chambers,
Can you hear me?
Aye.
Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee.
You said
Okay.
She's saying aye, but I think she's muted.
That's not.
Here.
Ms. Shinholster,
Here.
Mr. Mullins,
Here.
Ms. Walden, Ms. Walden,
Here.
We got you that time.
Mr. Chambers,
Okay.
Here.
Dr. Lee.
here. All right, we're officially out of closed session, back into regular section, and no action taken. I need a motion to, well, at this particular time, I'm gonna adjourn the work session.
Move we adjourn the work session.
Second.
Work session adjourned. Did you catch that, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.